In this video, we're going to learn how to write and solve a system of equations. So first thing I'm going to do is read the problem. Lillian and Jacob work at a dry cleaner's ironing shirts. Lillian can iron 25 shirts per hour, and Jacob can iron 20 shirts per hour. Lillian and Jacob worked a combined 13 hours and ironed 295 shirts. Determine the number of hours Lillian worked and the number of hours Jacob worked. The first thing we're going to do here is to define our variables x and y. The way I figure that out is these questions are always going to ask you to determine something or solve for something. That's what your variables are going to be. So in this case, it says determine the number of hours Lillian worked. So we can say x represents the number of hours Lillian worked. The other thing we need to solve here is the number of hours Jacob worked. So that's going to be my other variable y. Okay, now that I know that, I'm writing that down so that when I get my answer, which will be two numbers, I can kind of reference back and make sure I know what those numbers represent. Next up, we need to write a system of equations. And I can do that with the information that I have. So I'm going to go ahead and reread the problem and pull out some important information. All right, so as I'm reading this, I see that Lillian can iron 25 shirts per hour. And Jacob can iron 20 shirts per hour. All right, and then I have two total values here, and I want to pay close attention to their units. So together, Lillian and Jacob worked 13 hours. So one total that I have is 13 hours, and another is that together they ironed 295 shirts. So I'm going to start with that total of 13, and I'm referencing back to my x and y. X is the hours Lillian worked, and Y is the hours Jacob worked. So if I do Lillian's hours plus Jacob's hours, that gets me to 13 hours total. But now we have variables to represent these, so this is the same as saying X plus Y equals 13. So that's one equation that I have. The next equation is based around this total of 295 shirts. And that's where this other important information comes in, is because Lillian can do 25 shirts per hour. So if I multiply that by the number of hours she worked, I'm going to add on to the total. So we get 25x. Then Jacob does 20 shirts per hour, and I'm going to multiply that by the number of hours that he worked. So 20y. And those combined should give me the number of shirts they ironed all together, which we know from the problem is 295 shirts. All right, and now I have my two equations. I'm going to go ahead and solve it. In this case, this looks like I could solve by either by elimination or graphing. So I'm going to go ahead and solve by elimination, and then I'll check my answer with graphing. All right, so the way I'm going to do that, I'm going to copy down the problem here so I can work with it. All right, in elimination, I need a coefficient of one of the variables to match. So I can either multiply the top equation by 25 or 20. It doesn't really matter. They'll both kind of get me the same answer. I'm going to multiply it by 25 to make the coefficient of x match. All right. Actually, I'm not going to use an equal sign. I'm going to use an arrow there. right, so we get 25x plus 25y equals, let's see, 25 times 13 is 325. And then I'm just copying this down to make it a little bit easier to add and subtract in a moment. All right, next up, adding and subtracting. So the 25s have the same sign. So when I subtract them, I get to 0. So I'm going to subtract both equations here. And we get 25x minus 25x is 0. 25y minus 20y is 5y. And 325 minus 295 is 30. All right, there we go. Let's finish up solving this. All right, so already I know that, let's see, that's y is 6. So if I scroll back up to what y represents, that means that Jacob worked 6 hours. We need to also find out how many hours Lillian worked. All right, let's do this. So I'm going to take either one of the original equations and this y equals 6. And let's see, 25x plus 20 times 6 equals 295. Actually, let's backtrack, because even easier, one of my original equations was x plus y equals 13. X plus 6 equals 13. This one's just a little bit easier to solve. 13 minus 6 is 7. Sweet. All right, and now I'm going to put that into a sentence. Let's see. X is 7. X represented the hours Lillian worked. So Lillian worked 7 hours, and Jacob worked, I believe it was 6, but let me scroll up. Yep. Jacob worked 6 hours. And that's the solution to this word problem.